Hi everyone, welcome to Greenmonk TV. This is the Data Center War Stories series sponsored by Centilla. The guest on the show today is Harkeeret Singh, aka Harqs. Harqs is the EMEA Tech Chair of the Green Grid. Harqs, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tom.
So, Harqs, as the Tech Chair of the Green Grid in the EMEA region, you get a larger overview of what goes on in data centers than some of the previous interviewees we've had on the show. We've been talking, about kind of the war stories, the issues that data centers have come across and ways that they've resolved them. I imagine you'd have some interesting stories to tell about what can go on, in data centers globally. Do you want to talk a bit about some of that stuff?
The Green Grid undertook a study which implements a lot of those good practices that we all talk about in terms of improving airflow management, increasing temperature, putting in variable frequency drives. And what we did was, after each initiative, we measured the benefit of, in terms of, from an energy consumption perspective. Kerry Hazelrig from the Walt Disney Company led this study in a data center in the southeast of the US. And we believe that this is representative of most data centers, probably pre-2007. So we think there's a lot of good knowledge in here which others can learn from. So I'm going to take you through some of the changes that were made, and some of the expectations, but also some of the findings, some of which we weren't expecting. So starting with, there was 5 different initiatives. So the first initiative was implementing the variable speed drives. And what we found was, they installed new crack units and cry units, which they put in variable frequency drives in the standard. There's 14 of them. And then they retrofitted 24 existing CRAs and took out the fixed speed drives and put in the variable speed drives. And the expectation was we would find a reduction in energy consumption and fan horsepower. And also there was a potential of maybe looking at, are we still providing enough cooling to the right places in the data center? And once we put those in, we found that they didn't actually introduce any hotspots, which was a positive thing. But some of the things that were a little different from what we expected, the PUE didn't reflect the savings. That was because there was external factors, things like the external weather, which impacted the PUE figure as well. So you need to bear that in mind as you make changes. You need to look at the average across the year. The other issue that they found was, by putting in variable speed drives, they found it introduced harmonics to the power systems, and that came through the monitoring tools. And so they put in filtering to help resolve those harmonics. The last issue was also around skills. So they had to train the data center staff on using variable frequency drives and actually maintaining them. This was the biggest power saving. It was a third of the overall saving. And the saving in total was 9.1% of energy consumption. And that saved something in the order of $300,000 in terms of real cash. And the PUE went down from 1.87 down to 1.64 by doing these 5 initiatives. The second initiative was actually putting in the airflow management, so things like the blanking panels and the floor grommets, putting in the cold tiles where they're supposed to be, and that was for around 700 cabinets. And the findings were that that reduced the cold aisle temperature because you had less mixing, and also increased the temperature on the hot aisle in terms of the temperatures going back to the CRA. So that was interesting. We saw that being a key enabler to actually increase in temperature. So you have colder cold aisles and hotter hot aisles because of less mixing. There wasn't any energy savings for this piece in itself, but this airflow management activity is an enabler, in that it allows you to then do some optimization and also to increase temperature without risk. The third activity was relocating the sensors that the CRAs worked off, from taking it away from the return to crack and return to CRA, which is what most data centers use today, to actually aligning that to sensors on the front of the cabinets. So actually moving from return air to supply. And that's what ASHRAE, the specification that ASHRAE provides, that's what we should be controlling, the temperature and the humidity of the air going into the servers. They themselves say they don't really care about what the temperature is coming out the back of the servers, although the rest of us do, from making sure that it's not too hot for our data center operators. So what we did was move those the sensors to the front of the cabinets, and what that did was that optimized the fan speeds and actually started to right-size the temperature and the cold air that was required by the servers. It did take them a little while getting the locations right, so making sure that they aimed at moving them around as much as possible, looking at CFD to make sure they were optimizing and putting it in the right place eventually. And that was a small improvement, but it was again another enabler for increasing temperature. So there was only a few percent improvement by doing that, but what it does is when you start looking at increasing temperature, you're increasing temperature at the right point.
So how much did they increase the temperature by? Was it like from 20 to 25, or what was the kind of...
That's a good question. That's the next initiative they did, was they increased the temperature. So I was just about to... So they went from 18 degrees C, which was what their original set point was, and they ticked it up to 22 degrees C. Now, obviously that's still in the middle of the ASHRAE standard, so there is still more scope there to become better. But it wasn't just increasing the temperature in the room, but it was actually increasing the temperature of the chiller plant, which where the biggest savings were. So if you increase the temperature of the room, that then allows you to increase the temperature of your chiller plant. And that's what they increased the set point of their chiller plant from 6.7 degrees C to just under 8. And what they found was there was significant savings due to the reduction in compressor and condenser fan power. And what they found was for each, and I'm going to do this in degree F because they calculated degree F, so they went from 44 to 46 degree F. For every degree F they increased the set point of the chiller, they found that reduced just over 50 kilowatts of chiller energy consumption. Now, in terms of other people's data centers, the whole sort of your mileage will vary depending on the configuration and where you are, but that's where the significant saving was. By doing that, what they found was by doing it in this way, where they put the airflow management in place, and then they increased temperature in the room, increased the set points of the chiller plant, they found that actually that made no significant impact on the data center, in terms of hotspots or anything like that. So there's no detrimental impact to the data center by doing this. Obviously, the saving of the energy was a positive and saved real money.
Harqs, that was great. Thanks a million for coming on the show.